Welcome to this introduction to ancestral healing and reverence. So it might be interesting to learn in the first instance that you don't actually need to know anything about your ancestors to participate in this work. And a lot of people assume that you do. But we have to remember that our ancestors don't just mean those that maybe lived in the last several hundred years, the ones that maybe we do have some information about because maybe we heard about them from our elders, our grandparents, our great-grandparents. Maybe we have even been able to do some research and source some information about them. Our lines go way, way, way further back. Right back to the beginning of humanity when people weren't even really speaking in languages, let alone writing anything down. And even record keeping over the years has not been adequate, depending on maybe things that were happening through certain periods of time where it just wasn't possible, like during wars and conflicts. So we can't know everything about all of our ancestors. We can't necessarily know who they were, where they lived, and what they did. And that's still okay. All of them are still equally important, from the very earliest ones to the most recent past. When we do this work, we are honouring all of them. And sometimes we may have a little bit of information, we might have a lot, and there might be things that we've heard about our ancestors that we really like and admire and respect, and there might be things that we are quite shocked by, maybe even disgusted or ashamed by. And all of that is perfectly normal. In all of our lineages, we will have had people who did wonderful, altruistic, amazing things, and we will have had people who maybe did unkind, unnecessary, and maybe even violent things. But what they did is not for us to carry as individuals. When we do this work, we are helping the ancestors to heal their own wounds so that we are not affected by them. Because generational trauma, whether it was inflicted or even whether you were the perpetrator, can be carried forwards. And there's even been scientific research based around what we carry, which is more than just our physical genetics. You know, it can be emotional and mental as well. So when we do this work, we're embracing all the possibilities that our ancestors may have been. And what's also really important to know, this isn't about doing things like seances or any kind of psychic spiritual work where you're deemed to be summoning the dead or doing anything untowards or disrespectful. This is about creating respectful and reciprocal relationships with our ancestors, and they, to participate, also have to be open, ready and willing, and not all necessarily are. So what we tend to do first is connect with those ancestors who are healed and well. And some people, based on the information that they do have, don't believe that they have healed and well ancestors. Maybe they've even had not great experiences of past relatives and elders that has left a mark, a feeling like that there is no good in their ancestry. But again, we have to remember the last several generations are not just it. There was a time, a very ancient time, when all of our ancestors lived in harmony with the natural world. They understood the cycles of life and death. They very much lived in nature, experiencing those cycles starkly every day. They would see life and death happening right in front of their eyes, and they lived amongst their dead. They didn't put their past loved ones in cemeteries behind gates. They very much buried people, or in whatever way they ritualized their passings. They would be close by, not far away necessarily. You know, they would be able to visit them whenever they wanted, because they might literally be outside the door. So things have very much changed in how we view our ancestors and the deceased, and the whole subject of death and dying is something that in the modern world, especially here in the West, we find difficult to discuss and embrace, but it's very much a part of our lives. It's the one thing that is truly unavoidable, and it's been to our detriment to not actually have an intimate relationship with the past and the idea of passing. So yeah, through this ancestral healing and reverence season that we're having, as I record this video, the autumn equinox was just yesterday, and in many places around the world, but especially in the northern hemisphere, this is now what we know as the time of the ancestors. So right from after the equinox, in some places, particularly in the east, they already start their ancestral reverence and honouring through the coming weeks. And then here in the UK and other parts of Europe, no doubt, we will come into the time of what we now know as Halloween, but the ancient Celts would have called Samhain. That eventually came to be All Hallows Eve, All Saints Day. In Mexico and South America, there will be the Day of the Dead, and these are all happening around similar times. It's really interesting how people thousands of miles apart have tuned into this time of year as being an important portal to revere and honour the ancestors. But you can do it at any time of the year. It's really important also to know that this work doesn't have to be limited to the autumn winter. You can do it at any time that you feel the call, and also it's not just something you do once. Because our ancestry is so complicated and vast, there are no quick fixes to this, unfortunately. This is the work of a lifetime, maybe even several, because we have to remember that whilst our most ancient ancestors did this, especially here in the West, the last several hundred years in particular, maybe a bit longer, this kind of remembrance and healing and honouring has not been done, at least not by the masses. So it's time now to reclaim those old ways for not only us in the present and our healing and well-being, but for those yet to come. So that's just a starting point there for you to consider. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask me in the comments below. but we shall be exploring this more deeply as the weeks progress. So thank you for listening, and thank you for being here on behalf of your ancestors.